Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Arvind Keprate and currently I am an associate professor in one of the public universities in Norway. And today I thought of sharing with you some of the details and very important information related to do a PhD in Norway. So in today's video, I will be discussing these 4 major points which I have jotted down in here. The first will be that why should I do a PhD or is PhD for me? After that, we will talk about the eligibility for doing a PhD in Norway. And then I will tell you a bit more about that what is the process of doing a PhD, or first of all, how do you file in your candidature? And after that, what is the total process of getting into a PhD? And then finally, towards the end, I will talk about that what are the benefits of doing a PhD in particular in Norway. So let's start this video and hopefully you will find something important and something useful for your life in this video. So guys, the first question which comes into your mind, or even the question which came into my mind, was that why should I make my life more miserable? Why should I make my life more miserable by pursuing a PhD? Or I have already finished my master's, why do I care about a PhD, right? So how can you find this out? That is PhD a right thing for you or not? So try to understand this. Each one of us has a particular way of doing things, right? So the first thing that is a requirement if you want to pursue a PhD is that you should not hate studies. What do I mean by this, that you should not hate studies? It means that you should find an enjoyment when you are doing research, when you are studying, whether it is for your exams or whether you are researching to go on a trip somewhere, right? So if you have that kind of mental attitude, so it means that PhD is the right thing for you. Because understand this thing, when you pursue a PhD, right, you are not working in a team. So the entire project, most of the time, the entire project will be done by you, which means that you have to study a lot. You have to do a lot of literature survey. You have to find the objectives for your research. And once you have found that, you have to do some sort of analysis, especially if we talk in terms of engineering. So if you like all of this, right, you like to do a lot of research, you like to do analysis, then I would say that PhD is the perfect thing for you. And I would also like to mention it here that PhD, there are 2 things involved when you do a PhD. One is the product. So the product would be your thesis, your PhD thesis that you have to deliver at the end of your PhD, right? And then the process. I lay more emphasis on the process, which means that when you do a PhD, during those 3 or 4 years when you're pursuing your PhD, you learn a lot. The way you attack a particular problem, right, that will also change. So you become more scientific, more rational while you pursue a PhD. And then all of these skills, these scientific skills which you have acquired, the scientific aptitude towards life, right, or attitude towards life, you can then apply the same principles for any problem. So that is, I personally feel that that was one of the greatest additions to my life when I pursued PhD. And then another thing, again, the same question, why should I pursue a PhD? So now the answer is a bit different. And the answer now would be that if you want a life in academia, which means like you like to teach and you want to become an associate professor, a lecturer, or say for example a professor in Norway, or I think in rest of the world as well, PhD is a must, right? So the answer now would be that if you like to teach students at a college or a university level, then one of the academic requirements is that you must have a PhD. Then only your gateway to the academia is opened. So I think I have laid sufficient emphasis on this and I have convinced you to pursue a PhD. If somebody asks me after masters, what should I do? I say that, okay, if you are eligible to do a PhD, just do a PhD. And do a PhD in Norway. I will talk about it towards the end, that what are the benefits of doing a PhD, especially in Norway. So now the next point, that is, okay, now I'm ready to do a PhD in Norway, but the question is that am I eligible to do a PhD in Norway, right? Just your willingness wouldn't grant you a PhD, right? So now what are the eligibility requirements? I would lay emphasis on that. So especially in Norway, the first thing that is most important is your grades, which means that during your masters, now what would be the tenure of masters? I will talk about it a bit later, but during your masters, you must have an average B grade in your subjects and you must have a B grade in your thesis. So tenure is not that important, but what is important is that your masters must comprise of a thesis. I know a couple of fellows who pursued their masters from the UK, and in UK the masters is only of 1 year. On the contrary, in rest of the world, or say in India or in Norway, masters is of 2 years. So tenure doesn't matter. What matters is that the country in which you pursued your masters, right? For example, you pursued your masters in UK. If you are eligible to pursue PhD with that masters in the UK, then in Norway also they will allow you to file your application for PhD, right? Which means that you are eligible. But what is important, again I am saying that your masters must have a component of the thesis in that. So if you have a component of thesis and both in the subjects and in the thesis you have an average B, then you qualify. Okay. So now what is an average B? Let's try to understand that also. According to Norwegian standards, if you have more than 80% marks out of 100, then you qualify for an average B. Okay. It means that you have a B grade. But what about that case in which you have not pursued your masters in Norway? For example, again taking an example of the UK, maybe they have a different grading system. So in that case, what the rule says is that suppose the highest grade suppose the highest grade that the university offers is 70 plus, right? And then the second highest grade is 60 plus. So in that case, even if you have 62%, but your university says that this is the second highest grade we give, then you still qualify. Okay, so there is not one-to-one mapping that if Norwegian standard says that you should have 80 plus marks, then only it is a B grade. But if you pursue your masters from some another country, for example India or UK, where it is a bit difficult to score such marks, then they will not say that okay, you don't have 80%, you don't qualify. On the contrary, what they will say is that you must ask the university from where you did your masters to write it on a letterhead and tell us that okay, this is the highest grade we give, this is the second highest. So if you fall in the category of second highest, it means you are eligible. So that is actually one of the most important eligibility criteria which you must know. Then the second is depending upon from which country have you done your masters. For some countries, for example, if you did your masters from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, right, you might have to give an English proficiency test and you must score, I think, 6.5 in all of the sections. So that is again another eligibility requirements. So now this was an eligibility requirement. So if you qualify, if you have the sufficient IELTS score, if you have sufficient grades, then you qualify for PhD. Okay. So now let's talk of the process. So what is the process? So generally in Norway, most of the PhDs, they are advertised on this website, which is called as jobbnorge.no. You are seeing it on the screen right now. So the first thing is that try to find a relevant position for yourself in this website, right? Once you have done that, then the process is very simple, right? You fill in all in the details, attach all of your documents, right? And just press the send button or submit button. Then your application goes to the relevant university. So now let's take an example that somebody wants to pursue a PhD in, say, artificial intelligence. Okay. Now what will happen is, on an average, about 60 to 70 candidates would apply for that particular position throughout the world. Okay, and then as a next step, what happens? HR, they will actually segregate the qualified and the non-qualified. And how do they do that? They would actually check that, do you have a master's which has a thesis component? Have you given in your IELTS score, etc., etc., all of this. So now let's assume that out of 60 people, 40 are shortlisted, right? Now what is the next step? So as a next step, what will happen is that an expert committee will be formed, and this expert committee will comprise of I think 3 professors, right, or 3 experts in your area. And then all of these 40 students, right, their application will be sent to the expert committee. Generally, an expert committee is given about 6 weeks to, make a report, make a comprehensive report. So all of these individual experts, they will assess all of the candidates individually. They will go through each application, right? And then they will make a report. And then finally, before making a final report, they will actually discuss it. And then out of these 40, they will actually rank, say, top 6 or top 7 students. And they will have to actually give good reasons that why this particular candidate is number 1, why this particular is number 2, etc. So out of 47 or 8 candidates, say maximum, they will be actually shortlisted for an interview process. So now some of you might be thinking that, okay, how or what are the criteria on which an expert committee will rank the students? So let's try to understand this. First is definitely your academic grades. So that plays a very important role, right? So if there is someone who is having all A's, right, then he is definitely going to be in the top. The second is the relevance. So for example, if out of 40, I would say 10 students, they have worked previously in the domain of AI, which means that they had their master thesis in AI. So it is for sure that they would also be in the list, right, in the top ranks. So the relevance. And third is how much papers have you written? So people ask me that, is it mandatory to write papers? And I say, no, it's not, but it definitely gives you a competitive edge, right? So try to convert your master thesis into a paper, a journal or a conference paper, right? Because what does it showcase? It showcases that you have the ability to do research, right? So these are the 3 criteria, which I would say: your academic performance, the relevance to the call, right, and the number of publications that you have made. And then definitely your work experience, and if you have worked as an internee, if you have worked in a previous some research lab, all of this also counts. So now 7 candidates, they have been shortlisted. So now what will happen is this report will be sent to all of the 40 candidates. So when you apply for a PhD in Norway, the best thing which I like is that even if you are not shortlisted in the interview, you will be given the report, and from that report you can actually gauge that where you lacked, right? And next time you can improve upon it. So now let us assume that you are into the top 7 candidates who have been shortlisted, right? So then this expert committee report is sent back to the professor under whom the PhD will work, and then all of these supervisors and co-supervisors, they will organize an interview. So how does this interview look like? So generally there can be 2 interviews, right? The first interview is generally an HR kind of an interview, right? Or they will ask you, okay, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, etc., etc. And then the second interview, it can be a bit more technical, that plus focusing on the research, that okay, how do you plan to solve this? Okay. And one thing which I actually forgot is that when you are filing your application, then for a PhD, in most of the cases, you are supposed to write a research proposal, right? You are supposed to write a research proposal, whether it is of 2 pages or 5 pages, and also a statement of purpose. So that research proposal and that statement of purpose will be now brought in front of the professor who is interviewing you, and he will ask you the questions based upon that. So be very careful about what you write. So if this interview process has happened, and then finally out of these 7 candidates, 1 candidate is shortlisted for a PhD position and he is offered a contract. So now people might ask that, okay, for how many years does this contract is for? So it depends. If your PhD involves only research, that is, it is a pure research based, then it will be of 3 years. On the other hand, if you also have to do a bit of teaching, that is 25% of teaching each year, then it automatically becomes a 4-year contract. So that is something, it depends upon what kind of position you are offered. And next is that, okay, what are the salaries or what are the benefits? So towards the end, I will talk about it. The first thing which you should understand is that when you are, in Norwegian they call it stipendiat, or a PhD candidate or a researcher in a university, you are not a student. Okay, you are an employee of you are an employee of a university, which means that you are paid. And the stipend, how much is it? So to give you a rough figure, gross per month you get 35,000 NOK, and after tax you get about 25,000 to 26,000 Norwegian kroners, right? Which is quite a handsome amount. So this being said, that is one of the benefits, that you are being paid for doing research, and this is a very good amount of money, I would say, right? You can easily survive with your family in that. Then the second is, besides this stipend which you get, you also get 120,000 Norwegian krones for 3 years, which is kind of a grant from university, and that is an automatic grant. Why is that for? That is so that if you want to purchase, for example, some software, right, or some hardware, or if you want to go to some conferences, if you want to publish your article in an open access journal, so that 120,000 NOK is totally in your PhD fund, right? So you can utilize it the way you want it. And then third is, most of the Norwegian universities, they also have this guaranteed mobility grant, which means that for a minimum period of 3 months and maximum of 6 months, you can go to any research institute in the world which is relevant for your PhD, and they will give you a grant for that, which is again depending upon whether you are going with family or you are going single. They will give you around, I think, so if you're going with a family, so beside your salary, beside your stipend of 25,000 NOK, you also get an additional mobility grant of 35,000 NOK per month. So that is also a great opportunity. I myself utilized this mobility grant when I went as a researcher at NASA Ames Research Center in California. So this is another benefit. And besides this comes a benefit of independence, right? So again, it depends from case to case, but there is no one to micromanage you when you're doing a PhD. As I said, it is your work. You are fully independent, but at the same time, with independence comes a lot of responsibility. If you utilize this, these 3 years or 4 years of your life in a very effective way, then you can definitely accelerate yourself, your career later on. Right? So I think these were some of the moot points which I wanted to discuss with you regarding PhD in Norway. So if you have any questions, you can let us know and we will definitely try to answer your queries. So hopefully you found this video useful, it was informative, and you will also be one of the PhD candidates pursuing their PhD, doing research in Norway. That is my wish for you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.